Brush is an electric toothbrush that will change the way you think about brushing your teeth. With powerful sonic technology and ultra-gentle bristles, the Brush redefines what it means to have super clean teeth. It's like that feeling when you just leave the dentist, a fresh, whole mouth clean every single day.
Our listeners get 15% off their total purchase with the code POD15. Follow the link to the show notes and enter the code POD15 to get your exclusive discount and upgrade your oral care routine.
The Oracle Network.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Single.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm full of brats and beans.
That's a wicked combination right there.
I'm probably going to regret it here in like a half hour.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're not regretting it already.
And be like, I am full of all the regret. Okay, so this is like the first pseudo-official episode of our quote-unquote new year of podcasting. Year 2 of podcasting, I guess. Yeah.
Should we just call it a season and be one of those?
I mean, we could. Season 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
The
Our
Reckoning.
seasons are just the next year.
Yep.
We could call our first season The Plague, since it was during
We call it season 1 Masked, and then the second season Unmasked. So this case took me down like a rabbit hole. And funnily enough, this is the case that I started researching last week because I forgot that it was our anniversary episode. So I got like halfway through my research for this one before I was like, oh, shit, rewind. And then I had to like research an entirely new case.
Yeah.
But which was fine. Because then when I went back to this one to finish the research, it was already mostly done. But then I still spent another like 5 hours on it. So.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued. What is this?
We are going to be discussing Kate Webster. Are you familiar with that name at all?
I'm familiar with the name, but like my pea-sized memory is in and out like the wind. I don't.
Okay. So this topic was requested by Bernadette of the Murderific podcast.
Thank you, Bernadette.
So I hope you like this because it took me down all the internet rabbit holes.
There's a lot of deep ones in there too.
Mm-hmm. Felt very much like Alice in Wonderland during this one.
Ooh.
So information was pulled from the following sources: a 2021 catdebit.com blog post, 2017 The Irish Post article by Gerard Donaghy, 2017 Mental Floss article by Sonia Batomsky, an archival piece from the University of Cambridge, a core article from the Oxford Brookes University by Anne-Marie Kilday entitled Constructing the Cult of the Criminal, Kate Webster, and then I'm not going to read the rest of it. It'll spoil it.
Partial title. Thank you for your service.
Yes. You can read the full title in the show notes. And then encyclopedia.com, which had a lot of wrong information. Shame on you, encyclopedia.com.
Wow. Nothing like the books.
No.
Am I right?
Whoever wrote that did not proofread it or check their sources. So shame on you.
Oh, bummer.
And then Old Bailey Online, Murderpedia, and Wikipedia.
Wikipedia wasn't wrong?
Wikipedia wasn't wrong because it had all the source material, and that's why I have multiple sources.
Yep.
Because it would have been soups wrong. So links to all these articles will be included in the show notes. So before we begin today's tale, which may be one of the more well-known cases we've covered since our episode on Mary Ann Cotton, I just want to give a warning that it will be gross.
Oh.
And I'll let you know when we get to the gross bits, but just to give y'all a little heads up. It's not super bad.
Okay, good, because I just had a chalupa, so anything could happen.
It's graphic enough where it might upset somebody. So I wanted to give a heads up.
Okay.
So born Catherine Lawler in Killan, Ireland, near Enniscorthy, County Wexford, in 1849, to poor but respectable parents, not much is known about her early life. By the age of 15, she'd already been imprisoned for larceny in Ireland.
What?
Yes.
Dang.
And following her release, she continued to commit petty theft until she'd saved enough money to emigrate to England via Liverpool before eventually settling in London in 1867.
Okay. That's where all the bad blood people go.
That's where all the fun stuff happens.
Yeah.
Upon arriving in London, Catherine became very acquainted with time in jail by serving short sentences for pickpocketing and larceny. She wasn't very good at pickpocketing.
Yeah, I think it would be hard in a dress that has no pockets.
Yeah, I just think she didn't really have the soft touch that a good pickpocket needs to be able to succeed in that craft.
You really hard. Grabs it, is like, you didn't see anything.
She just shoves her hand down in your pants really roughly and then tries to run away in a bustle. Good luck.
I fell. Tell no one.
She falls into you and just like paws frantically at you. Run away. When not imprisoned, she'd skulk about London with the use of a number of aliases to avoid capture, such as Webb, Gibbs, and Lawler. Regardless, she'd eventually find herself back in jail time and time again. At some point, she took and settled on the moniker of Webster and claimed to have married a sea captain with whom she'd had 4 children. When pressed on where her family was, she'd say they had all died.
That's aggressive.
Yeah. The Daily Telegraph later described Kate as a, quote, tall, strongly made woman with sallow and much freckled complexion and large and prominent teeth, end quote.
Oh, that's not a very nice description.
No.
But also, that just gives me more oomph to my, like, she shoved you really hard and was like, oops, my bad, I fell. When she tried to rob you.
Yeah, I'm going to send you a picture of this woman because she is...
Oh, no. Well, it just kind of spoiled it, but thanks.
What? Oh, did it tell you what it is? Oh, shit.
Yep.
Shit. Ignore that. Ignore that. Fuck.
No. But yeah, she is. She's pretty scary.
She looks like someone who would kill you in your sleep.
It's because she has so much white in her eyes.
Is that what it is?
I don't know. Like she looks like a paper mache murder face that you would wear on Halloween, and they like couldn't quite get the dimensions of the eyes right.
She looks like if Wednesday Addams and Fester Addams merged together into one person.
Yes.
That's what she looks like.
Yep. You're right.
Okay, now stop looking at her. So don't spoil anything else.
Okay.
That was my bad. I should just copy and paste the picture.
I believe you did that. I saw the link and I was like, I clicked it and it's very clearly showcased what she did.
Damn it. All right. You'll forget about it in a few seconds. It's fine.
Honestly, probably.
So Kate found herself in penal prison for 4 years in 1868 for larceny at the age of 18. And after she was released in January of 1872, she worked as a cleaner and maid, but would still find herself in trouble. One con she committed multiple times was to rent a room at a boarding house before selling everything of value in the room and running away.
Dang. I mean, kind of clever.
She did that a lot. In an effort to make money, Catherine, who is now going by the name Kate, would occasionally work as a sex worker. As a result of this, she gave birth at 25 to a son on April 19, 1874, that she named John W. Webster. And contrary to what many sites stated, it's believed that she held great affection for her son.
But she actually probably loved him?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Kate never did disclose who the father was, listing 3 men as the potential father, one of whom was a man that she referred to as Mr. Strong.
Clever.
Yeah. Strong would be her accomplice in a number of robberies during their association.
Oh my God, that's his actual name?
Yeah. That's what she referred to him as. That was the name she gave him. I don't know if that was his actual name or not.
That's your name now. This is who you are now.
Forevermore, you'll be known as Mr. Strong. Kate once again found herself in prison twice for short stretches after giving birth to John. During an 18-month stay in Wandsworth Prison in West London, she was there after being convicted on 36 charges of larceny in May of 1875.
What? In like one sitting?
Yeah.
Dang.
And it was at this time Kate entrusted her son to a friend named Sarah Crease, who worked as a charwoman for a woman named Miss Loader.
Charwoman? What's that?
So in Victorian England, a charwoman was another name for a maid hired to clean homes and offices.
Oh, okay.
Basically just a cleaning lady, basically.
Okay.
Kate was back in prison a couple years later in February of 1877, once again for larceny, but upon her release, she filled in for her friend Sarah one day at the home of Miss Loader, because her friend Sarah was sick. Loader would go on to recommend Kate's services to a friend who she knew was looking to hire a servant.
Mm-hmm.
Enter our victim, Mrs. Julia Martha Thomas.
No.
Julia Thomas was a retired school teacher and a twice-widowed wealthy 52-year-old who lived at 2 Mayfield Cottages, Park Road in Richmond. She lived in the leftmost portion of the 2-story semi-detached villa that was surrounded by gardens. She was noted as a small, well-dressed lady who had an excitable temperament and was a little eccentric. She was known to travel frequently, at times for days, weeks, even months at a time, without a word to her friends or relatives.
Okay, so it would have been easy for her to disappear for a few days without anyone really knowing where she went.
Correct.
So, unfortunately, a pretty good victim.
Yeah. Mrs. Thomas hired Kate on the spot on January 13th, 1879, but their relationship was hardly a good one.
Oh.
During Kate's tenure as her housekeeper at the age of 30, even though everything seemed to start off just fine, she stated that Mrs. Thomas often criticized the quality of her work, not to mention chastise her for all the time she spent at the local pubs.
I mean, if your cleaning lady isn't cleaning well, and like taking lots of breaks, you could say something.
Yeah, well, and I think based off what I read, Mrs. Thomas was a very devout Christian. And so I'm sure she viewed drinking as a sin.
Judgy. Maybe a little aggressive about the cleaning because of her judginess. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Of her time working for Mrs. Thomas, Kate stated, quote, "At first I thought her a nice old lady, but her cleaning standards were strict, too strict. And she would point out places where she said I did not clean, showing evidence of a nasty spirit towards me," end quote.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
After working a few months for Mrs. Thomas, Kate was given notice to end her service on February 28th. Kate asked if it could be extended to March 2nd. On Sunday, March 2nd, 1879, a drunken Kate appeared on Mrs. Thomas's doorstep after spending time at an alehouse, and the two began quarreling over the fact that she'd come back late after visiting her son John, who was still being cared for by her friend Sarah Crease.
Okay.
Because at that time she was living with Mrs. Thomas, like she was her live-in maid.
Mm-hmm.
And so she couldn't bring her son with her. So her son was so she'd go visit her son during her time off. At that time, Kate had been allowed Sunday afternoons off with the stipulation that she had to be back before Mrs. Thomas left for Sunday evening services. So that's why she was a little pissed. Not just because she was drunk, but because she was late.
Therefore making her late to the service.
Yes.
Okay.
Once the fight passed, Kate seemingly went on her way, allowing Mrs. Thomas to attend church services. Things wouldn't take a turn until Mrs. Thomas later returned home.
Okay.
And people who knew Mrs. Thomas well commented on the fact that when she was at services that night, she did appear agitated and she was kind of out of sorts. And instead of staying and like kind of talking to people like she normally would after services, she just went straight home. So like she didn't dilly-dally. That night, Mrs. Thomas's landlady's mother, a woman named Jane Ives, who lived in the other half of the villa, later stated that she heard a sound, quote, like the fall of a heavy chair, end quote. During a fight that broke out upstairs following another quarrel, Kate threw Mrs. Thomas to the ground floor before she strangled her to death.
Eesh.
And say what you will about her, but Kate sure was inventive when it came to disposing of the body.
Oh no. Is this the gross part?
This is the part where things get a little gross. And it's very, very short.
Okay.
So after strangling Mrs. Thomas, Kate dismembered her body with the help of an axe before boiling her body parts in a laundry copper, which is basically like this, think of like a fireplace, like a stone fireplace that has like a big metal tub at the top. So you'd put firewood and stuff at the very bottom in like the fireplace part, and it would boil the water in the basin at the top for washing the laundry.
Okay.
So she put her in that part and was like boiling her.
Ugh.
She then took Mrs. Thomas's bones and proceeded to burn them in the hearth along with the bloody clothes she'd been wearing. And because she couldn't stand the stench, Kate went next door to the hole-in-the-wall pub and enjoyed a few drinks before returning to the house to finish up the job.
Gross.
Not long after this, Kate, posing as Mrs. Thomas, in a silk dress and carrying a black bag, began the process of trying to sell all the furniture of her late employer.
Yeah, why not? Old habits die hard.
She visited a family called the Porters and quickly spun a tale of how she'd been married, had a son, and then was widowed soon after before her kindly aunt in Richmond willed her home. And she asked the Porters if they knew of anyone who might be interested in purchasing furniture. The Porters told her that Mr. John Church might very well be interested. So Henry Porter and his son Robert accompanied Kate to Mr. Church's so they could make introductions.
Okay.
As the trio made their way back from Mr. Church's, they stopped at a few pubs along the way, one of which was located near Hammersmith Bridge.
Okay.
Once they arrived at the pub, Kate excused herself with the bag she'd been carrying, and upon returning to her companions, the bag was nowhere to be found. And when they asked about the bag, because it was a really big bag,
probably pretty heavy.
Pretty heavy, because they had taken turns carrying it for her.
Nice.
So think of, the old medical bags that doctors during that period of time would use. Think of it as
a weekender bag version.
Like a weekender type bag, like that same kind of setup, but twice as deep, twice as wide. So very big bag. Okay. And it was typically something that you would wrap rope around or something to make sure it stayed closed. So this wasn't like a small purse, handbag. This was a big bag.
This was a big bag.
So it was while at the beer house that Kate asked Henry if he would allow her to bring his son Robert with her to Richmond. And he agreed as long as she sent him back that same night by the last train. If she needed help moving something so a friend could pick it up for her.
Okay.
After they arrived in Richmond around nightfall, the pair returned to Mrs. Thomas's home, where Kate carried out an ornate bonnet box. And I had to look up what a bonnet box is.
Yeah.
So it's
like a hat box?
No. It was intended to hold a bowl and pitcher for cleaning in the area at the top. And then it had an area below that had shelving, which I'm assuming was for towels and other linens. So think of a dresser sized piece of furniture that has a flap at the top that would cover up the pitcher and the water basin where you would wash your face and stuff. And then the bottom with drawers and shelves.
ye old really intense makeup wipes.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's like an actual a dresser sized piece of furniture.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a big piece of wooden furniture that was about the size of a small dresser, not just some handbag.
Yeah.
And Kate asked Robert if he would help her carry it over the nearby Richmond Bridge.
Yeah, that's huge.
Once they had crested the bridge, she asked him to leave her alone for a minute as she was meeting a friend, and she told him she'd meet back up with him shortly. Robert later told the court that since it was so dark, he didn't want to wander too far away, so he was about a few yards off when he heard a large splash in the water below the bridge. When she met up with him again, she simply stated, "Well, that's over."
Nice. Subtle.
Yep.
Way to keep in character.
It was around 11:30 at night at this time, and since it was so late, she couldn't send Robert home that same night because the trains weren't running anymore. Instead, the pair slept at Mrs. Thomas's cottage before she sent him back home to his father the next day. And Kate, under the assumption that she'd committed the perfect crime, sold Mrs. Thomas's furniture to Mr. John Church on March 9th for £68, which would be about £8,600 today. With the understanding that he would schedule delivery vans to pick up the assorted furnishings on March 18th. So that would have been almost 3 weeks after she actually murdered Mrs. Thomas.
Dang.
And she asked for £18 or about £2,300 up front, which he gave her. On March 5th, So just 3 days after the murder, a coal porter named Henry Wheatley discovered the bonnet box along the shore near the Barnes Railway Bridge, which is a few miles downstream from where Kate had dumped it into the Thames. He was horrified to discover that inside the chest were the mangled remains of a woman's torso, legs, and one foot.
That's so awful.
At this point in history, forensics was still very much in its infancy, and medical examiners were unable to identify a body without a head.
Yeah.
A cursory examination of the remains couldn't turn up any clues as to how the mystery woman had died, even though what appeared to be the missing foot of the victim turned up a few days later in the nearby suburb of Twickenham.
Oh, no.
It didn't really give the police anything to go off of. So the remains were buried at the local cemetery, and the press began referring to the case as the Barnes mystery.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks later, on March 18th, 2 men went to the home of Mrs. Thomas with the van to procure the goods on behalf of Mr. Church.
Right.
By this point, Mrs. Thomas had been missing for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Miss Ives, the same Miss Ives who had heard the strange noises the night of March 2nd, went outside to ask the men what they were doing.
Of course.
And they had told her, that they were coming to procure furniture from Mrs. Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And after, quote-unquote, Mrs. Thomas was summoned to assist in the sale of the furniture, Miss Ives recognized her as Mrs. Thomas's servant, Kate. Kate told Miss Ives that Mrs. Thomas was traveling, but she wasn't sure where. Shortly thereafter, the men left without taking anything from the home, and Miss Ives called the police to report her neighbor missing.
Weird.
Kate was seen leaving the house a little while after this and wasn't seen again until she was extradited from Ireland. Upon leaving the house, she picked up her son and a black bag before taking a cab to Hammersmith Station. After getting a ticket for King's Cross, she headed home to Ireland. She had spent 2 weeks living in Mrs. Thomas's home, wearing her clothes and posing as her whenever tradesmen would come to the house.
Gross. Wow. That is awful.
Yep. When police entered 2 Mayfield cottages to search for clues as to Mrs. Thomas's disappearance, they found a horrid sight. Bloodstains were everywhere, with some showing signs that attempts had been made to clean up the mess.
Of course.
Charred bones were found in the kitchen grate, and a fatty substance was found behind the laundry boiler.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Kate didn't cover her tracks well enough, as the police were able to find a scrap of paper with her address in Ireland, and they quickly sent out officers to bring her in for questioning.
Yeah, she's dumb.
She's pretty dumb.
I'm ready.
A full description of Kate Webster was circulated by police on March 23rd in connection to the murder of Mrs. Thomas and the theft of her personal effects, which included several clothes and pieces of expensive jewelry. Police were able to track Kate down in Killane, Ireland, where she was arrested on March 28, 1879, at her uncle's farm by the Royal Irish Constabulary. She was brought back to London to face trial, still wearing clothes and jewelry belonging to the late Mrs. Thomas.
She's the worst.
As she was taken back via train, spectators would lay in wait at train stations, hoping to catch a glimpse of the now infamous Kate Webster.
Yeah, because she was gross and horrifying and terrible.
Yeah. The Richmond police were able to get Kate to make a statement on March 30th when she was formally charged with the murder. In the statement, she accused John Church of being responsible, and he was also arrested and charged with the murder. Fortunately for Mr. Church, he had a strong alibi, and the charges against him were quickly dropped. Meanwhile, Kate was transferred to Newgate Prison to await trial. And the impending trial was a media frenzy.
I bet. I can imagine.
Not only had Kate committed a gruesome murder, but she'd attacked and killed someone above her station.
Yep.
Not only that, but she was also a woman.
Mm-hmm. And she was Irish.
Yeah. There was a lot of prejudice against Irish during this time.
Yeah. That makes sense.
As it was noted in a book on the case entitled Murder, quote, Victorian ideals of femininity envisioned women as moral, passive, and not physically strong enough to kill and dismember a body, end quote.
Yeah.
So she quickly was just like, yeah, no, I could do that. And if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yep, real good at it.
Yep.
Yeah, gross.
Sunday, April 13th, a black bag was fished out of the Thames below London Bridge.
Okay.
The bag had been weighed down with 2 bricks, but it's believed that due to the state of decomposition, it began to float even with the added weights.
Yeah, can't underestimate the power of gases.
Yep. Upon examination at the police station, it was believed to contain the remaining remains of Mrs. Thomas, who by that point had been listed as missing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you'll recall, I think her arms were still missing at that point. Robert Porter was fetched to verify that the bag in question was the one that he had carried for Kate. After looking at it, he stated that it was different from the one he carried, which led police to believe that there was a second bag that contained further remains of the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Her head was never found.
And she never told him where it was. You stuck, Kate.
As she awaited trial, stories began to circulate regarding Kate and her crimes. There were unfounded reports that she had tried to sell 2 pounds of lard to a neighbor following the murder of Mrs. Thomas.
Oh, no.
And then offered the same fat to neighborhood children after the neighbor refused to purchase it from her.
Stop it. Oh, no.
Many journalists likened her to a female version of Sweeney Todd, attempting to sell the reduced body fat of her victim under the guise of common lard.
I'm sure they had just the greatest time with that.
Yeah. And there was, like I said, there was no, like pretty much every site mentioned this, but there was no evidence backing up these claims. It was just sensational journalism.
Yeah, that makes sense that it would be wildly sensationalized because it's just so shocking.
Mm-hmm. Wednesday, July 2nd, Kate Webster was brought to the Central Criminal Court, or the Old Bailey, to stand trial before Justice Denman and was charged with the willful murder of Mrs. Julia Martha Thomas on March 2nd at Richmond in Surrey. The prosecution was led by the Solicitor General himself, Sir Harding Gifford, as well as a Mr. Poland and a Mr. A.L. Smith. Kate was defended by Mr. Warner Slay and Mr. Keith Frith. This next part is something I never heard of before. A Mr. J.B. Brindley acted as witness on behalf of the church. And now that I'm saying that, I wonder if he was a witness
to how wonderful Miss Thomas was as like a Christian woman.
Maybe. If it was, because I know that
to be more damning for Kate, because she was not.
Yeah.
She was not a Lutheran lady.
Yeah, I'm sure she was Irish Catholic.
Yeah, the odds of her being Catholic are 50-50.
Very, very high. Especially at that time in history.
Yeah.
The solicitor started the trial by stating for the jury that Kate had begun her employment with Mrs. Thomas in January as a general servant, and during this time she had entrusted the care of her 5-year-old son to a woman named Mrs. Crease, who she had been living with prior at Mitchell's Row in Hammersmith. During the trial, it was stated that the neighbors hadn't noticed Kate much until early March, when Mrs. Thomas hadn't been seen for a while. On March 4th, Kate had been seen leaving Mrs. Thomas's residence in the company of a man named Mr. Porter with a black bag. Henry Porter lived with his son Robert near a beer shop and agreed to assist Kate in carrying the bag to the beer house in the Hammersmith Bridge Road area. And it was at that time that Kate then proceeded to leave Porter and his son with the bag as they crossed the bridge. Yep, claiming that she was meeting up with a friend. And then about 15 minutes later, when she came back, she didn't have the bag with her. And as I mentioned before, Robert testified to having helped Kate move the bonnet box to the bridge where he heard the large splash.
Yeah. I bet that didn't feel good to say in a courtroom.
Yeah. There were reports that a tall gentleman was crossing the bridge at the same time, but the police never figured out who this person was, and it almost kind of sounded like a red herring. Like, oh, it could have been someone else. So,
no, it's like, no, it was her.
Yeah. When asked to testify, Kate at first denied committing the murder and instead pinned the blame on Henry Porter and John Church. She even said that Mr. Strong, the assumed father of her son, was also involved, but these claims were quickly proven to be false.
Yeah, grasping at straws, Kate. Sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Church testified that he hadn't known Kate until he was introduced to her on March 4th. Henry Porter denied all the claims that Kate made in regards to him, other than acknowledging that, yes, he had known her for some 6 odd years, as they had once upon a time been neighbors in Hammersmith, but they had not been close by any means.
Okay.
So when she was living with Sarah Crease, she lived fairly close to the Porters. So they would see each other on occasion, like kind of like as in passing, but they weren't close by any means.
They weren't besties.
No.
Yeah.
Like, I think in the records he said, he'd seen her maybe a handful of times before she just appeared out of the blue being like, hey, friend, can you help me move some furniture? Fun fact. The future king of Sweden, Crown Prince Gustav, attended Kate's trial on the 4th day of her proceedings.
Just for funsies?
Just for funsies. Like, that's how
popular and high stakes it was.
Yeah, that's like how
sensational. How
sensational that case was. That he was like, I need to be there. He was like,
crazy.
I'm gonna go.
I'm gonna use my celebrity status.
Yeah, I'm gonna get in.
Watch this lady get wrecked by the government.
Yep.
By the law.
By the law.
By the law.
The trial lasted for 6 days, and on the 6th day, the jury recessed at 5:15 p.m. to reach a verdict and returned to the courtroom just over an hour later at 6:26 p.m. Mr. Avery, the clerk of arraigns, spoke with the foreman of the jury, who stated that the jury found her guilty of the murder of Julia Thomas, with the punishment being death. In a desperate bid to delay her execution, Kate claimed that she was pregnant.
Of course she did.
A jury of matrons, which is also known as a group of 12 women, examined her and declared that she was lying.
Dang.
Because at that time, if she was pregnant, they would have delayed the execution until after she'd given birth, and then they would have proceeded to kill her.
Which,
yeah.
Okay, but now you got an orphan.
Yeah.
Cool. Way to go, guys.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Tap on that shoulder.
Yeah.
The night before her execution, Kate recanted her story to the prison chaplain, Father McHenry, and apologized for implicating Mr. Church, Mr. Porter, and Mr. Strong in the murder. During her confession, Kate stated the following about the murder of Mrs. Thomas. Quote, "We had an argument which ripened into a quarrel, and in the height of my anger and rage, I threw her from the top of the stairs to the ground floor. She had a heavy fall. I felt that she was seriously injured, and I became agitated at what had happened, lost all control of myself, and to prevent her screaming or getting me in trouble, I caught her by the throat and in the struggle choked her. I chopped the head from the body with the assistance of a razor, which I used to cut through the flesh afterwards."
What? That is so much more horrifying.
I also used the meat saw and the carving knife to cut the body up with. I prepared the copper with water to boil the body to prevent identity, and as soon as I had succeeded in cutting it up, I placed it in the copper and boiled it. I opened the stomach with the carving knife and burned up as much of the parts as I could. End quote.
Oh. It's so gross.
The copper being the laundry boiler thing, in case that wasn't clear.
Yeah, that boiler's forever unclean.
Forever unclean. Kate stated that she packed all of the body parts into the bonnet box that could fit, and then the remainder were put into a bag before throwing them into the Thames. The only parts that weren't packed up were a foot, which was found in Twickenham amongst the rubbish, and Mrs. Thomas's head.
Gross.
On Tuesday, July 29th, 1879, at Wandsworth Jail, Kate was set to be executed. The only people present at her execution were the governor, the jail chaplain, the sheriffs, William Marwood the executioner, a select number of members of the press, and a few gentlemen who had, quote, been granted the privilege to be present, end quote.
Gross.
Kate was hanged at 9 a.m., making her the second person to be executed at Wandsworth and the only woman of what would become 135 total executed prisoners.
Wow.
Afterwards, a black flag was displayed outside the jail to announce that she had been executed. She was buried in an unmarked grave in one of the exercise yards at Wandsworth in grave number 3. Fun fact, many of the males' graves would be reused over the years to save space after the 90th execution at Wandsworth, but her grave was never disturbed. The last execution at Wandsworth would take place on September 8th, 1961.
Dang.
The home of the late Mrs. Thomas remained vacant for almost 20 years until 1897, when the murder had all but faded from the public's mind.
That makes sense.
Interestingly, in October 2010, a skull was discovered by workmen who were building an extension to the former home of Mrs. Thomas, which was then owned by TV naturalist David Attenborough.
Oh, of course he owned it.
The skull had one missing tooth and, quote, fracture marks consistent with the fall down the stairs and low collagen levels consistent with it being boiled, end quote.
Stop it. They found her head.
Through the use of carbon dating and by matching up the skull fractures with the testimony that Kate gave during her confession, it was discovered that the skull did indeed belong to Mrs. Julia Thomas.
Crazy.
Apparently, Kate had dumped the head under the stables of the nearby pub, the Hole in the Wall, which Attenborough had also purchased. Even up to her execution, Kate adamantly refused to disclose the location of Mrs. Thomas's head, most likely in a vain attempt to prevent police from identifying the boiled remains as those of Mrs. Thomas herself. Unfortunately for Mrs. Thomas, the location of the rest of her remains in the barn cemetery have been lost to time.
Yeah.
And the chances of her head being reunited with the rest of her body are quite slim. There was a rumor that Kate had sold Mrs. Thomas's gold bridge work to a pawnbroker for 6 shillings, but this has obviously been disproven because she had the bulk of her teeth.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Kate's son John, it said that her uncle refused to care for him after he heard what she was being charged with. And the Royal Irish Constabulary sent John to a local workhouse until they could find a place for him in an industrial school.
Never had a chance.
No. Fun fact, Madame Tussaud created a wax effigy of Kate a few weeks after her arrest and had it on display as the Richmond Murderess alongside waxworks she'd made of Burke and Hare.
Interesting. It was one of the first wax people.
The Madame Tussaud.
Wow.
And to close this really fucked up tale, here's a poem that was printed on a broadside along with several illustrations in 1879 that had an in-depth write-up of the case.
Okay.
Quote, "Behold a wretched woman dying, condemned to death for murder's sea. Kate Webster now in anguish crying, 'Twill end the famed Barnes mystery. The jury they have found her guilty. Mrs. Thomas, you from there on high. Behold your murderess now lamenting. You'll be revenged. She's condemned to die. 'Tis done, and I my death am waiting.' Kate Webster cries, 'Why was I born? To hear each witness against me stating. For me it fills each heart with scorn. As link by link they were unfolding, my fearful death I there could see. The hangman I shall be beholding, and meet a doom of infamy. Can e'er a wretch e'er hope for mercy? Was ever woman so vile as me? I hope that God above will pardon, and forgive when I am in eternity. Take warning by a wretched creature, who now in sorrow her death does wait. While tears are streaming down every feature, no one will pity my awful fate. I thought I ne'er should be discovered, that fearful crime I could conceal. But when the box it was discovered, my mistress's murder it did reveal. When captured how my heart was sinking, that boy porter the truth did say, from guilt and death I now am shrinking, in a murderer's grave I must lay. Farewell to all, my child, my father, for me the solemn bell will toll. Oh, what a child I had died rather, may God have mercy on my soul. O mistress dear, while you in heaven, your pity pray and pardon give, and may I hope to be forgiven, when on earth I no longer live.
Fun.
And that is the messed up tale of Kate Webster.
Damn.
I recognized the name before I started researching it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I saw the thing about the bag, I was like, I know what case this is. I know what this is.
No, but she's terrifying, though.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she looks terrifying. Like, that is someone that I would never let in my house.
That lighting was very unforgiving.
Yeah.
Incredibly unforgiving.
Like, could you imagine that face coming up to you and being like, can I clean your house?
My house is so clean. Like, thank you. Good day.
I say good day.
I don't actually live here. This isn't my house. Please leave.
You've been misinformed. I don't live here.
This is not my house. I don't own a house. I'm gonna go.
I just live in the garden out back. I have no idea who this house belongs to.
I gotta go.
She just starts speed walking to church. I gotta go. Sorry, God.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
The Lord calleth
God.
me.
You don't like him. He's my friend. I don't know you. It's my purse.
Please don't steal my jewelry.
My name is Bernadette, the host of Murderific True Crime Podcast. Murder plus horrific equals murderific. I cover some cases from the state of Maine in the United States and all over the world. Mass murders, domestic abuse, unsolved cases, serial killers, and mostly lesser-known subjects. We don't shy away from the details, but we do that with all respect. This isn't entertainment. These are real people's lives, and I'm here to tell their story. Join me for my Season 5 reboot, and together we will be executing podcasts one crime at a time.
So this week's podcast plug is the Murderific podcast.
Yep.
Murderific is a weekly podcast hosted by Bernadette, who covers local and worldwide cases, lesser-known cases, serial killers, the missing, mass murders, and domestic abuse. She does the whole shebang. She does a phenomenal job with her show, and the quality is really amazing, and it's a must listen. She does a great job with her research. The audio quality is on point. Check it out.
Check it.
We'll have a link in the show notes. And this week's question comes from our buddy Josh at the Four Nerds by Nerds podcast.
Okay.
He wants to know, if you could be any animated character, who would it be?
Pikachu. I don't think there's any explanation needed. Yep. That's my answer. Pikachu. Yep.
That's so you. That's such a you answer.
How about you?
I'm trying to think.
Don't think. That's how you get in trouble.
My gut reaction is Marceline from Adventure Time.
Yep. That makes sense. Yep.
Oh yeah. On that note, what's something good you'd like to share this week? You want me to go first and you can think?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, so my something good, the day we're recording this is a Thursday. And earlier today, I responded to one of Aaron Mahnke's tweets. And for those of you that don't know who Aaron Mahnke is, he is an established author who also is the host of the podcast Lore, which was like my gateway drug into podcasting and is one of my favorite podcasts.
To this day.
And he does 2 other podcasts, I believe. He does the Cabinet of Curiosities, and then he also does Unobscured. He might have another one that I'm unaware of. Those are the 3 that I know of right now. But I responded to one of his tweets, and he wrote back.
That's so cool.
And we had like a back and forth dialogue for a little while, and he gave like some encouragement for podcasting. He was like, "Are you making any ad revenue?" And I was like, "No."
Just enough to keep the lights on.
Pretty much, and sometimes I gotta pay for it out of my pocket.
Yeah. Hashtag Patreon.
Hashtag support us.
Buy me a coffee. I mean, like all of the coffees.
So yeah,
so cool.
at the end of the conversation, he was like, "You can do it, fist bump." And my heart stopped for a second because I was like, "Oh my God, we're best friends now." We're not best friends, but I feel like I've gotten closer to achieving that like dream that I put out over long ago about manifesting, having him on our show and stuff like that. So I feel like the seed has been planted. Like, hey, we had a conversation on Twitter. Remember that? I'm one of like the millions of people that's interacted with you on Twitter in the past however many years. But this was a special conversation that I'm sure you're going to remember forever.
Right. But he's honestly like a supportive enough soul that he might actually remember it.
I wasn't going to go full geek and be like, "Remember that one time when I saw you live and we had a conversation about that book that I couldn't find, but I wanted to find?" And you were like, "Good luck."
We proceeded to verbally bother your poor composer.
Chad Lawson. Oh, he's also a gem.
Hi, I like your music. I sometimes play tabletop games while listening to it.
I was like, "Hey, your music that you make for Lore is great background music for when you're playing Arkham Horror. Are you familiar with that tabletop game?" And he was like, "Yes, I am." And I was like, "Oh my God, it's great, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And I was like, You're welcome." That's your music.
Then we went to my apartment and ate pizza.
Yeah. Wasn't it the pizza that has like the macaroni and cheese on top of it?
And the pepperoni sticks.
And I wonder why I'm fat. Anyway. It was a few years ago. It's fine. It was 2017. So long ago.
So long ago.
No, it was longer than that, wasn't it? No,
2017, I think. Because we saw him in 2019.
Yeah. And by then he was in a bigger venue and more people were there. And other like local podcasters were there that I recognized. I was like, I know her. Not personally, but I know who she is. And then the line to meet him was like ridiculously long. And I was like, we already experienced that. Bye.
Yeah. And I had an anxious service dog that time around.
Yep. And then we went to your house and had pizza with macaroni and cheese on top of it. I'm assuming. Isn't that the time when we watched one documentary about the cult?
Yes. The Rajneeshis in Oregon. Rajneeshpuram. Wild Wild Country is the documentary.
Wild Country, yes. Yeah, we watched like the entire series while I stayed over.
Yep. Yeah, we did.
And I left being like, what the fuck? Cults are weird.
I remember that.
Anyway, what's your something good besides going on this journey down memory lane with me?
Okay, I do have something good. So my parents have this sweet little dog named George, but I call him George. And he has Cushing's and has had some of like the bald spots, and he's kind of swollen and he doesn't get around as well as he used to. And we recently found out he's been spitting out the medication, which is why he hasn't been doing well, because I kept finding the capsules stuck in his little goat beard.
Oh, what a turd.
That jerk. And like we tried hiding it in his food and he caught on pretty quick. Dad used to put it in turkey all the time and he caught on to that. So now what Mom and I do is there's a jambone that he really likes to eat. It's like kind of chewy. Mm-hmm. And we open the 2 capsules, put a little bit of water and like soak the jambone in it. And he's been eating that like once it's dried. And he's doing really, really, really well. Like he's lost weight, he's less bloated, he's moving around. He was playing with a cat toy the other day for the first time in like months. So it's just been really nice to see George become George again and be like comfortable in his body. So yeah, that's my good thing is George.
Yay,
George being George.
I'll post a picture of Goatman George on our social so you can see what he looks like.
I think I have a really good picture of him from when he was younger. And he was doing this like, why are you taking a picture of me?
I'll have to do like a George collage post or something. Like the mini faces of George.
George. He's seriously one of the best.
Shall we?
We shall.
You can find us online at yeoldecrimepodcast.com. We're also on Twitter at yeoldecrimepod and on Instagram at yeoldecrimepodcast. We are on YouTube, and I just spent a whole bunch of time today doing a really fun thing where I added some links to stuff and I updated the thumbnails on our videos to trick you into watching them. So maybe you should do that and subscribe because it'll make me feel better about myself and all the time that I spent doing it.
Yep.
Guilt. You can also write us or send us things if you want, because we have a P.O. Box. You can write to us at Ye Olde Crime Podcast, P.O. Box 341, Wyoming, Minnesota 55092. You can also email us at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We just answered our last question. So if you want us to answer more questions, you need to get on it and send some to us because we are out. Get down on it.
We're really good at that. If you want us to not do that, send in questions. We want to never hear that again, but give us money
and send us questions. If you're like, I can't give you money, but I want to support you, a great way to do that is by leaving a 5-star rating and review. And this week we have a review from our friend Argy on Apple Podcasts. And he says, so much fun, 5 stars. What fun. Lindsay and Madison are great, even with only a handful of episodes under their belts. This was back from like July 2020.
Okay.
You just know this is going to be on your favorites list. I started with the Long and the Pig episode and knew the reference, so I knew it would be a ride. Looking forward to more and more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Argy. He is a huge supporter of the independent true crime community, so that's why I was like, Argy. I was like really excited because I was like, awesome. I know that guy. He's great. If you are able and would like to support us financially, you can do so on Buy Me a Coffee and leave a one-time donation. You can also join our Patreon for as low as $1 a month, which will get you early ad-free access to our episodes. And depending on what tier you're on, it'll also get you access to outtake episodes, audio links to appearances we've made on other podcasts, things of that nature. You can also support us by purchasing some of our merch on TeePublic. So right now, when this episode comes out, you can enjoy 35% off June 10th through the 12th. And a reminder that this month, all proceeds will be donated to Outright Action International, who fights for the human rights of the LGBTIQ people everywhere around the world.
That's awesome.
You can also make a donation anytime by visiting their website, which we will have a link to as well in our show notes. And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Maddie.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
of this crime.